Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a sound. The soft pop of grapes being crushed under someone's heel, followed by laughter that's far too confident for this hour. You open your eyes to candlelight dancing off marble, the smell of wine thick as smoke, and the faint clatter of 100 secrets being poured into goblets. The woman at the center of it all? Rome's most dangerous hostess. Her name is Messalina, and if you've somehow been invited to one of her parties, congratulations. Your reputation won't survive till morning. But before you get too cozy, I just wanted to take a quiet moment to mention something new. I recently made another channel called Science to Fall Asleep To. It's a little different, but just as good for drifting off. You can find the link down in the description and pinned comment. But while you're here, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And of course, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Alrighty, that's enough instructions for one night, isn't it? Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You awaken amid velvet and vinegar, realizing you're inside one of Rome's strangest midnight rituals. The Empress is laughing. You're not sure why or if it's legal. The air hums with perfume and panic. Every surface glows with reflected torchlight, from the marble floors slick with spilled wine to the gold thread cushions that seem to sigh when you sit on them. A lyre player plucks something soft and wrong, the kind of tune that suggests the gods are watching but pretending not to. You can hear someone crying quietly in the corner, and someone else hiccuping into a goblet like they're auditioning for tragedy. A servant glides past you, carrying a silver platter stacked with oysters and something that might have once been alive this morning. He avoids eye contact, the way a man avoids lightning. You take one oyster and immediately regret it. It tastes like the sea after a long argument. At the center of it all sits Messalina, draped in silk so thin it looks like a rumor. Her hair is coiled in a style that could kill a small bird. Around her, senators and poets and professional flatterers orbit like drunken moths. One of them is reading a poem about her smile being brighter than the moon. You've seen the moon. The comparison feels generous. She's laughing again, and the room ripples with it. When the Empress laughs, everyone else laughs too, some out of fear, some out of hunger, and a few because they've forgotten any other noise their bodies can make. You join in because silence here feels suspicious. She rises suddenly, barefoot, wine-dark eyes glinting like the Tiber at night. "We're too sober," she announces. The crowd cheers as if sobriety were a personal insult. Cups refill, boundaries blur. Someone starts dancing on the table, knocking over a bowl of pomegranates that scatter like tiny heartbeats across the marble. You try to leave. The doorway looks close enough to reach in a few polite steps. Then Messalina's gaze catches you mid-escape, and your feet forget their purpose. "You," she says, voice soft as honey and sharp as a blade. "Come here." Every instinct in your body disagrees, but your body was never consulted. You walk toward her, the crowd parting like curtains. She takes your hand, studies it as if considering whether it could be improved. "You don't belong here," she says, almost fondly. "That's what makes you interesting." She gestures toward the table. You sit. Someone pours more wine. You drink because that's what Rome expects of you now. The taste is dark and heavy, like swallowing secrets. Across from you, a senator is telling a story about how he once outdrank Neptune. No one believes him, but they clap anyway. Messalina leans close enough that her breath tickles your ear. "Do you know why they stay?" she whispers. You shake your head. "Because leaving means remembering what's outside." Her smile is small, cruel, and almost kind. And who wants to remember Rome when you can have this? The musicians shift to a slower melody. Dancers twirl through shadows, their laughter thinning into sighs. Messalina reclines again, bored but radiant, as if she's both host and deity. You watch her feed a grape to a man who might be a general or a thief. It's hard to tell in this light. He trembles like it's communion. Hours or minutes or centuries pass. The candles gutter low, the wine thins to vinegar, and still the party doesn't end. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else vomits into a golden bowl. You realize that the laughter has stopped, replaced by a kind of desperate hum, the sound of people pretending they're still enjoying themselves. Messalina stands once more, stretching like a satisfied cat. "Tomorrow," she declares, "we'll do it all again." Cheers rise from throats too tired to mean it. She smiles, triumphant, as if she's conquered something invisible. You look around and understand the truth. This isn't a party, it's a trap set to music. And the Empress, barefoot and beautiful and terrifying, never lets her guests go until the sun comes up or until she's bored of them, whichever comes first. Outside, the city sleeps uneasily. Inside, the candles flare one last time, and you swear the walls themselves are laughing. Rome, in the heat of summer. The air smells like wine, ambition, and dead fish. You wander through marble streets, where senators whisper and slaves pretend not to listen. The stones under your sandals radiate yesterday's sun, and you start to wonder if Rome itself is trying to cook you. Every fountain gurgles with mockery, every statue sweats through its marble pores. You pass a beggar with eyes like cracked coins who mutters a prayer to Fortuna. She doesn't answer. She's probably at lunch. Vendors shout over one another, selling figs, perfumes, and curses. You stop at a stall where a woman is grinding something that looks suspiciously like snake. She tells you it's medicine. You believe her because it's easier than arguing with someone holding a pestle. The scent of the market swirls around you, honey. Smoke, old olives, something dying under a tarp, and you realize that Rome smells exactly like what it is, too alive to be clean. You pass a temple where incense clogs the air like thick wool. A priest waves his censer in long, confident circles, as if trying to hypnotize the gods into caring. The crowd bows their heads, murmuring half-hearted prayers between gossip. Someone whispers that the Empress visited this very temple last night, though not for worship. The priest keeps swinging the censer, pretending he didn't hear. Farther down, the forum churns like a hive. Men in togas argue about laws no one will obey, while pickpockets argue with purses about ownership. A slave stumbles and spills a basket of grapes across the pavement. Within seconds, a senator slips on one and curses Jupiter. The crowd laughs, then hushes, because laughter around power is contagious, but dangerous. You keep walking, shoulders tight, eyes open. There's a breeze near the Palatine Hill, though it feels less like relief and more like a sigh. You stop at a fountain carved with nymphs who look perpetually unimpressed. A soldier fills his helmet with water and drinks, ignoring the sign that says, "Sacred." You do the same, because thirst doesn't care about piety. The water tastes faintly of iron and incense, like Rome itself has been bleeding into it. The city never stops performing. Even the pigeons strut like senators, heads bobbing with importance. You pass a poet reciting verses about Messalina's beauty, while carefully avoiding adjectives that might get him executed. He notices your face and asks for a coin. You give him one, because in Rome, every favor is a kind of insurance. He blesses you with words that sound rehearsed and continues declaiming to the indifferent sky. Somewhere nearby, laughter erupts too shrill, too sudden. You follow it down an alley lined with frescoes faded by sun and scandal. At the end stands a tavern pulsing with heat and cheap music. Inside, men drink themselves brave enough to talk about the Empress. They call her dangerous, divine, insatiable. None of them lower their voices. That's how you know they're drunk. You stay long enough to taste the wine, which burns like ambition and regret in equal measure. then slip out before courage becomes contagious. By dusk, the city shifts. Shadows stretch like gossip, and torches bloom one by one along the streets. The smell of cooking meat mingles with the river's sour breath. You catch sight of the palace far above, lit in gold, as if the gods themselves have rented a suite there. Messalina is said to be hosting another gathering tonight. The rumor travels through Rome like a heartbeat fast, rhythmic, impossible to ignore. Servants hurry with baskets of fruit and bolts of silk. Musicians trail behind them, tuning their lyres and praying not to be noticed. You pause at the edge of the crowd, staring up at the palace gates. Somewhere beyond those walls, laughter will rise again, sweet and dangerous. You can almost smell the perfume drifting down, masking the rot beneath. A cart creaks past, its wheels sticky with spilled wine, its driver humming a hymn to pleasure. Rome hums with him, alive, obscene, and eternal. You turn toward the noise and keep walking, because the city doesn't sleep, it just changes masks. And tonight, its newest one smells of jasmine, sweat, and something quietly burning. You see her for the first time, Rome's golden serpent, barefoot, bored, devastatingly curious. The kind of woman who collects husbands like others collect debts. She moves through the courtyard like a roomer learning to walk, each step quiet but deliberate, the sound of her anklets sharper than conversation. The air bends around her, as if even the wind is trying not to stare. You're standing behind a column, pretending to study a mosaic. Everyone else has already forgotten how to blink. Messalina doesn't announce herself. She just exists, and the world adjusts. The courtiers whisper her name, the way children whisper ghost stories, half terrified, half thrilled. She catches one of them looking too long and smiles, the kind of smile that could ruin a marriage before dinner. Her hair isn't perfect. That's how you know she's dangerous. The curls are slightly disobedient, as if even they refuse to be ruled. She wears a thin robe of pale linen, almost transparent in the sunlight. Not scandalous, exactly just intentional. You've seen priests handle relics with less reverence than the crowd gives her bare shoulder. A servant drops a tray. The sound breaks the spell. Messalina glances at the man, tilts her head, and somehow turns his apology into performance. "Careful," she says, her voice low and warm like spiced wine. "You'll make me think you're nervous." The servant stammers, the crowd chuckles, and she keeps walking, already bored of both. You'd heard the stories, of course, the whispered jokes about her midnight games, the plays the censors kept banning because they got too close to truth. They said she married the emperor, then married Rome, then tried to marry herself to pleasure just to see who would break first. Watching her now, you start to believe every word. She stops by a fountain, dips her fingers into the water, and flicks a few drops at a senator too slow to bow. The droplets land on his toga like blessings or punishments. It's hard to tell. "You look hot," she says, and the senator laughs too loudly. Everyone laughs too loudly. You don't. You're too busy wondering how one woman can turn a compliment into an execution. A poet nearby starts reciting verses about her eyes. She interrupts after the first line. "They're not blue," she corrects, amused. "They're dangerous. Try again." The poet turns pale and starts improvising about storms and sirens until she waves him away with a gesture so lazy it feels like mercy. You notice the emperor watching from a distance, small and gray beside her brightness. Claudius looks like a man who married a wildfire, thinking he could keep it in a jar. His gaze follows her with the weary affection of someone who knows he's both king and hostage. When she finally glances back at him, it's not love, you see, it's ownership, pure and unashamed. Messalina approaches the dais where gifts are laid out for inspection. Gold, pearls, carved ivory, all gleaming tributes to her appetite for attention. She picks up a necklace, studies it, and then places it around the neck of another woman without explanation. "Pretty things belong on pretty people," she says. The crowd exhales in relief, because it wasn't them. A child tugs at her robe holding a flower. She bends, takes it, and smiles like the sun just remembered its job. For a heartbeat, she looks almost human. Then she drops the flower into the fountain, watches it sink, and walks away. The child doesn't cry. Everyone else seems to want to. As she passes you, her eyes flicker your way briefly, carelessly. It's enough to make your heart trip over itself. She doesn't stop, doesn't need to. You feel seen, judged, and dismissed in a single glance. Somehow, that feels like a gift. When she disappears into the palace, the courtyard exhales. The crowd starts murmuring again, piecing the moment back into gossip. You stay still, the echo of her presence humming in the air like the aftertaste of something forbidden. Rome's golden serpent has slithered out of sight, but the mark of her passing lingers. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell tolls the hour. The city keeps breathing, pretending it isn't intoxicated, and you, still hiding behind your mosaic, realize that nothing in Rome will ever smell the same again. You learn how she married Claudius before she could legally vote, then made the Roman Empire her personal stage. History will call her perverse. She calls it Tuesday. You hear the story first from an old senator with teeth like worn marble. He tells it the way fishermen talk about storms, half in fear, half in fondness. Messalina was 14, maybe 15, when she was married off to Claudius, the man who would one day rule Rome, mostly by accident. He wasn't supposed to be emperor. He was supposed to be the quiet uncle with a limp and a library. But Rome has a sense of humor, and so does Messalina. The wedding itself was said to be magnificent. Gold dust scattered on the floor, peacock feathers in the air, slaves fanning everyone into submission. You picture her standing beside him, a girl with eyes full of calculation, pretending to blush. Claudius, older and distracted, probably mumbled his vows like a man reciting tax codes. She smiled anyway. She knew the empire didn't marry men, it married opportunity. Claudius was kind enough. In the way old furniture is kind, it doesn't mean to hurt you. It just does when you sit wrong. He preferred scrolls to people, mushrooms to conversation. When he became emperor, Rome expected a dull reign. Messalina had other plans. While he was signing decrees about grain supply, she was discovering the real power of proximity. The palace was her playground, and every corridor whispered her name. You hear the servants talk about her like she's weather. Unpredictable, intoxicating, impossible to avoid. One swears she once hosted a feast so lavish the floorboards bent under the weight of the platters. Another says she made lovers out of poets, guards, even a baker's boy who could knead dough and egos with equal skill. They say Claudius never noticed. Or maybe he did, and decided not to look directly at the sun. There's a story about the first time she realized how much Rome would let her get away with. A senator complained about her conduct, and she invited him to dinner. He arrived expecting apology and found himself seated beside the man's own wife, who seemed oddly cheerful about the arrangement. By dessert, everyone was laughing. No one ever complained again. In public, she played the role perfectly. The dutiful empress, eyes downcast, hands folded. In private, she became Rome's secret heartbeat, the pulse behind its marble chest. You imagine her pacing the palace at night, bare feet silent on mosaic floors, thinking of ways to make history blush. Claudius slept soundly in another room, dreaming of aqueducts. She dreamed of conquest. Her influence spread quietly at first, a favor here, a whisper there. Senators found themselves agreeing to laws they hadn't read. Courtiers found themselves promoting men they didn't like. Every decision seemed to trace back to the same smile. The empress never signed anything, but her fingerprints were everywhere. One evening, you overhear two scribes talking in the library. One says Claudius has a genius for administration. The other says Messalina has a genius for everything else. They laugh nervously and glance at the door, as if she might walk in at any moment. She doesn't, but the silence that follows feels like she did. Outside, the city worships her as much as it fears her. Children whisper her name like a dare. Men brag about knowing her. Women brag about surviving her. Rome loves excess, and Messalina gives it form. You walk past a statue, newly erected in her honor. The sculptor has given her a modest expression, though even carved in stone. Her eyes seem to be laughing at the hypocrisy. A pigeon lands on her shoulder, cooing softly. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, signaling the start of another imperial meeting. She will be late. She is always late. It keeps them waiting, and waiting is another kind of power. You realize, watching the marble glow in the sun, that she isn't playing the part of Empress. She's rewriting it. And Rome, poor obedient Rome, doesn't even know she's already directing the sequel. The palace becomes a circus of pillows, whispers, and bribes. You discover that lust in Rome is just another form of politics, and Messalina is its prime minister. The marble halls echo with laughter that sounds a little too rehearsed, and the servants move like ghosts carrying trays of fruit and secrets. Every night feels like a festival that forgot to end, and every morning smells like guilt disguised as perfume. You learn quickly that the rules here aren't written down. They're breathed into your ear when the lights are low. A glance can be an invitation, a toast can be a trap, and a misplaced compliment can turn into a promotion or an exile. The courtiers know this game well. They play it with smiles so polished you could see your reflection in them. Messalina taught them that seduction isn't about desire. It's about direction where it leads, who it ruins, and how loudly the city will whisper afterward. She holds court not in the throne room, but in her bedchamber, where the walls are lined with silk and the air feels heavier than sin. You're not supposed to be there, but you are. Everyone is, eventually. The Empress hosts these gatherings with the precision of a general planning a campaign. The invitations are verbal, the entry requirements flexible, and the exit uncertain. She lounges at the center, barefoot, wine in hand, the picture of effortless control. Around her, senators trade jokes and glances, pretending not to flinch when her laughter cuts too close. The bed itself becomes a stage. It's where alliances are forged, promises are whispered, and favors are earned one sigh at a time. Messalina's laughter weaves through the room, soft and cruel, as she watches men twice her age stumble over their dignity. One offers her a villa near Ostia. Another offers his vote in the Senate. She thanks them both with the same half-smile, and somehow both think they've won. Claudius is nowhere to be seen. He's likely in his study, translating Greek philosophy or counting coins, pretending not to hear the music. The guards outside keep their eyes fixed on the floor. Everyone in Rome knows the emperor's wife is a problem, but no one wants to be the one to solve it. You watch as a poet recites verses about love, each line dripping with desperation. Messalina applauds, then asks if he wrote them before or after he met her. The room laughs too loudly, and the poet blushes the color of spilled wine. She leans forward, traces a finger along his jaw, and says, "Good answer," though he hasn't given one. He will later, when she calls for him again. Behind the laughter, you sense the tension tight as the strings of a lyre. Every guest here knows that one wrong word can end more than a reputation. A woman tells a story about a merchant who boasted of turning down the Empress's advances. The next morning, his shop burned down. No one believes it was an accident, but everyone agrees it was funny. Messalina moves through her own party like a deity bored with worship. She listens to gossip the way a lion listens to rustling grass, calm, patient, waiting for something worth devouring. When she speaks, it's never loud, but the whole room bends toward her. She tells a senator's wife that her dress is lovely, though it would look better on someone younger. The woman laughs, because what else can she do? You realize then that this isn't about lust at all. It's about power disguised as pleasure. Every kiss is a contract, every sigh a signature. Messalina doesn't conquer with armies. She conquers with indulgence, turning appetite into empire. The men think they're seducing her. The women think they're surviving her. Both are wrong. When the candles start to die, the music softens into something almost melancholy. The guests slip away, pretending they were never here. Messalina stretches, yawns, and asks for more wine. Her servants obey, silent as statues. For a moment, she looks tired, not from guilt, but from the effort of being so endlessly entertained. Outside, the night air feels lighter, freer, like the city itself exhales when she sleeps. You walk through the courtyard, still hearing her laughter echo behind you. It lingers like perfume, clinging to your skin, reminding you that in Rome, even pleasure has consequences. You attend what begins as a banquet and ends as something no banquet should. Someone faints. Someone else takes notes. You just try to keep your toga on. The evening starts the way most Roman evenings do, with too much wine and too little self-control. The palace glows with torchlight, its corridors blooming with perfume and laughter. Somewhere, a musician is already drunk enough to believe he's good. The invitation said, dinner, but the tables suggest otherwise. Platters of oysters glisten beside roasted peacocks, wearing their feathers like crowns. The smell of honey and meat mixes with the scent of incense until you're dizzy. You take a seat beside a man who claims to be a philosopher, but spends most of the night staring down the neckline of his neighbor. Across the room, senators loosen their belts and morals at equal speed. Then she arrives. Messalina glides into the hall barefoot, draped in something that could be silk or temptation itself. The chatter dies. Even the candles seem to lean closer. She looks pleased by the silence, as if she's tamed Rome with nothing but an entrance. A servant kneels to offer her wine. She ignores it, preferring the intoxication of attention. She gives a smile that feels like a secret and claps her hands once. The musicians shift, the rhythm thickens, and the first course gives way to spectacle. Dancers appear from nowhere, half naked and entirely unashamed, their bodies moving in perfect rhythm with the heartbeat of the room. You look around, wondering if anyone else is uncomfortable. No one is. They're too busy pretending they aren't. Messalina reclines on a couch of crimson velvet, watching her guests unravel like ribbons. She doesn't speak. She orchestrates. Her glances are commands, her laughter applause. A senator attempts a toast to virtue and the glory of Rome, which earns him a raised eyebrow and a burst of laughter that makes his face turn the color of wine. You make a mental note never to mention virtue in this room. Hours melt. The banquet turns feverish. Someone proposes a contest, one of those whispered about in the taverns but never spoken of in daylight. Two courtesans laugh. A challenge sparks. And before long, the night becomes something that would make the gods turn their eyes. The guests cheer, Rome's elite reduced to voyeurs and poets without pens. You catch yourself clapping, then pretend it's for the music. Messalina watches from her couch, unbothered, delighted. You realize she isn't participating, she's conducting. This isn't debauchery to her, it's strategy. She's mapping loyalties, measuring weakness, seeing who looks too long and who dares to look away. When a man faints from heat or humiliation, she barely glances his way. When another takes notes, yes, actually takes notes, she sends him more wine. At some point, food becomes decoration. A peacock is pushed aside for a better view, and grapes roll underfoot like forgotten currency. You try to eat an olive, but it feels like eating in a temple mid-sacrifice. A woman next to you whispers that Messalina once bet she could outlast the most infamous courtesan in Rome. You laugh nervously, unsure whether it's a joke or an omen. Claudius, as usual, is absent. The emperor's chair sits empty, symbolic and irrelevant. Someone raises a cup in his honor. The toast is half-hearted. He's the ghost of the room present in title, missing in spirit. His wife, meanwhile, reigns unchallenged over chaos itself. By the time dawn starts leaking through the curtains, the music is thin and the guests are exhausted, their faces glowing with the shame they'll deny tomorrow. Messalina stands at last, her robe slipping just enough to make silence fall again. "Enough," she says softly, as if the word itself is scandalous. She looks around the room, surveying her empire of ruin. You expect a farewell, perhaps even guilt. Instead, she smiles. "We'll do better next time." The crowd laughs, relieved, reverent, ruined. You stumble out into the morning air, blinking at the pale sky. The city is quiet, still unaware of the madness its empress has staged. Somewhere behind you, the palace hums like a secret too big for daylight. You pull your toga tighter and promise yourself you'll never attend another banquet. You know you're lying. It starts, as most disasters do, with a dare spoken too loudly in a room full of wine. Messalina lounges on her couch, surrounded by men who confuse laughter for courage. Someone mentions Scylla, the city's most famous courtesan, a woman rumored to make poets forget their verses and generals misplace their swords. The empress tilts her head, listening. Then she smiles a small, dangerous curve that means someone is about to learn the limits of their imagination. By dawn, the challenge is official. Rome buzzes like a disturbed hive. Messalina has declared a contest. She and Scylla will spend one night proving who possesses the greater stamina, charm, and utter disregard for reason. No rules, no mercy, only witnesses. The city can hardly breathe for excitement. You try not to think about it, but the more you try, the more your brain insists on picturing every scandalous possibility. It's like trying not to picture a lion in your kitchen. The night arrives heavy with heat and curiosity. You find yourself outside the palace courtyard, pretending you're there for official business. The gates are closed, but the air itself seems to pulse with the noise inside. Laughter, music, something that might be applause. Servants rush past carrying trays of figs, bowls of honey, and enough wine to flood the Tiber. You catch one of them whispering that the empress is winning. You decide not to ask what that means. Inside, the atmosphere is unholy and magnificent. The lamps burn low, painting everyone in molten gold. The scent of perfume and sweat clings to every breath. Senators, soldiers, and poets sit shoulder to shoulder, pretending they're observing history instead of scandal. At the center of the chaos, Messalina reclines on silken cushions, her hair tangled and her smile serene. Across from her, Scylla glows with the practiced confidence of someone who's made a profession out of survival. The competition isn't about flesh. Not really. It's about control. Messalina turns every glance into dominance, every laugh into strategy. Scylla responds with elegance, grace sharpened into defiance. It's theater performed with bodies instead of scripts. When the musicians start again, even the statues seem embarrassed to watch. Someone faints halfway through, unclear whether from the heat or the spectacle. A philosopher scribbles notes furiously, muttering something about the moral decline of civilization, though his quill keeps slipping whenever Messalina laughs. You spot a senator praying silently into his cup. It's unclear which god he's appealing to, or whether any of them would dare answer. As the hours stretch, the energy changes. The laughter fades into a rhythm, slower and stranger. You sense that everyone in the room feels the same mix of awe and terror, like witnesses to an eclipse they know they shouldn't be staring at. Even Scylla, flawless and furious, begins to tire. Messalina, meanwhile, looks almost bored. She stretches, drinks from a jeweled goblet, and gestures for more music, as though this entire display is just another diversion between meals. When the dawn finally leaks through the curtains, Scylla bows her head in defeat. The empress raises her cup, not in triumph, but amusement. "Rome," she says, voice soft and hoarse, "can sleep now." The crowd erupts in nervous cheers, as if applauding a miracle they don't understand. The musicians stop, the slaves begin to clean, and you realize no one dares look her directly in the eye. Later, the city tells the story differently each time. Some say the contest lasted a night, Others swear it stretched for 2. Poets turn it into metaphor. Priests turn it into warning. Messalina never corrects them. She just smiles when the rumors reach her, amused by how the truth always sounds dull beside her legend. As for you, you walk home through the bright morning streets, pretending you didn't hear or see anything. Rome hums around you, alive and shameless. You tell yourself the memory will fade, but deep down, you know that whenever someone whispers her name, you'll see that small, impossible smile, the one that told the world even shame was hers to command. Claudius prefers paperwork to passion. While he dreams of tax reforms, Messalina turns the palace into a brothel, and you're accidentally on shift. The night begins innocently enough, which should have been your first warning. A messenger hands you a scroll stamped with the imperial seal, and because you're both curious and foolish, you open it. Inside is a single sentence. Attendance mandatory. Wear something washable. When? If you arrive, the palace looks different. Too many lamps, too much perfume. It's the kind of scent that could smother a conscience. The guards at the door look everywhere but at you, which is never a good sign. Inside, the atrium has been transformed. Curtains hang where walls used to be. Fountains bubble with wine instead of water. And there are cushions everywhere, soft, expensive, and ominously stained. You ask a servant what's happening, and he just shrugs. The Empress has repurposed the palace, he whispers. She says it's for morale. You spot Claudius's study down the hall, its door firmly shut. Through the crack, you hear the faint scratch of a pen and the occasional contented sigh, probably about new aqueduct funding. He has no idea what's happening 50 paces away. Or maybe he does and has chosen to treat it like bad weather. If he ignores it, it might pass. The main hall hums with noise. Musicians play too fast, guests talk too loud, and the air itself seems drunk. Messalina sits on a raised couch, draped in pearls and mischief, surrounded by Rome's most respectable men, behaving like they've forgotten what respect looks like. She greets each newcomer with the same soft smile, the kind that promises danger disguised as delight. You bow, unsure if this counts as a meeting or an initiation. The Empress claps her hands once, and the festivities begin. The torches dim, the music swells, and the palace becomes something between a carnival and a confession. Servants pour wine as fast as people can lose their inhibitions. A senator shouts a toast to the freedom of Rome, then falls off his chair. A priest argues that what's happening is metaphorical, which earns him laughter and a seat beside 2 dancers determined to prove him wrong. You try to disappear into the corner, but that's impossible here. Messalina's gaze sweeps the room like a spotlight, catching anyone foolish enough to think themselves unseen. When her eyes find you, you freeze. She beckons you closer with one finger. You obey, because no one has ever disobeyed that finger and remained employed. Enjoying the evening? She asks, voice smooth as olive oil. You nod, which is only partly true. Good, she says. You look terrified. I like that in staff. Then she turns away, already bored, leaving you standing beside a platter of grapes and a man pretending to faint. The night spirals from excess to spectacle. Couples vanish behind curtains that flutter like guilty thoughts. Musicians abandon their instruments to join the chaos. Even the marble statues look scandalized. At one point, someone mistakes you for an attendant and hands you a tray of wine. You serve it without question because survival, in Rome, is mostly about pretending you belong wherever disaster happens. Every now and then, you hear the scratch of Claudius's pen in the distance, steady and oblivious. You picture him surrounded by scrolls, muttering about census reforms while his wife conducts her own form of public administration. You wonder if anyone will ever tell him. Probably not. Some truths are too exhausting even for emperors. By midnight, the hall is unrecognizable. The couches are crooked, the torches flicker low, and half the guests are missing their shoes or their dignity. Messalina reclines amid the wreckage, looking utterly content. She raises her cup, smiles faintly, and says, "Rome is happiest when it forgets itself." You slip away before sunrise, stepping into the cool, silent courtyard. Behind you, the palace still throbs with muffled laughter and broken lyres. The city beyond is quiet, unaware that its empress just turned the heart of empire into an orgy and called it celebration. Somewhere inside, Claudius turns a page, sighs, and keeps writing. He dreams of order, she dreams of conquest, and for one surreal night, both of them get exactly what they want. You're invited to a secret villa where everything is for sale, except innocence. The torches burn pink, and laughter sounds a lot like confession. The messenger doesn't tell you who sent the invitation, but the wax seal and entwined pair of serpents makes it obvious. You consider saying no, then you remember that people who say no to Messalina often stop being people, so you say yes. The road outside the city winds through cypress trees that look like they're keeping secrets. By the time you arrive, the sun is gone, and the air smells of salt, myrrh, and something sweeter you can't name. The villa glows ahead like a mirage, columns draped in silk, musicians half hidden behind vines, their music slinking through the garden like smoke. You tell yourself, it's just another Roman party. You know you're lying. A servant greets you with a smile that's too polished to be genuine. He presses a cup of wine into your hand before you can protest. It tastes like honey in surrender. Inside, everything gleams. The floors are marble. The walls are covered in frescoes of gods pretending not to watch mortals misbehave. The guests move in slow, deliberate chaos, draped in gauze, perfumed within an inch of divinity. Everyone's pretending they've never heard of shame. Messalina appears the way thunder follows lightning, barefoot, jeweled, radiating the confidence of a woman who knows she's the most dangerous creature in any room. She doesn't speak, she just walks through the crowd, and conversation collapses in her wake. You feel her presence before you see her, like a change in temperature. When her eyes finally meet yours, it's not a glance, it's a choice. Then she moves on, leaving you with a pulse that suddenly feels like a liability. The villa is a labyrinth of indulgence. Courtyards open into chambers filled with cushions and laughter. Fountains flow with tinted water, rose, amber, violet. A man in a senator's toga feeds grapes to a dancer who can't be older than 16. A woman dressed as Venus challenges a priest to drink until he forgets his vows. He accepts. Everywhere you look, someone is bartering decency for entertainment. It's less a party than a marketplace where desire is the only currency. Messalina rules it all from a terrace draped in ivy. She sits like a queen of contradictions, half goddess, half child, dangerous because she doesn't bother to hide either. Courtiers kneel at her feet with gifts, pearls, poetry, promises. She accepts them with the detachment of someone who already owns everything. You wonder if she even enjoys any of it, or if enjoyment has simply become another performance. At one point, she orders the torches doused and the guests to find their way by touch. The garden dissolves into darkness and laughter. You stumble into someone soft, perfumed, amused. You don't ask their name. In the dark, names feel irrelevant, like laws or loyalty. The night hums with whispers that sound like prayers and gasps that sound like answers. When the torches flare back to life, no one looks the same. You catch sight of Messalina again near the fountain, her hand trailing through the water, her bracelets catching the firelight. A man kneels beside her, whispering something that makes her laugh, a low, melodic sound that makes even the marble seem to lean closer. Then she turns and kisses him like punctuation, as if to say, "There, that's settled." When dawn finally creeps across the sky, the guests scatter like dreamers waking too soon. You step outside, the air cool and cruel after so much heat. Behind you, the villa still flickers with fading torchlight, a cathedral built to temptation. Somewhere inside, Messalina is likely already planning the next gathering, the next experiment in how far Rome can fall before it notices. You look back once, and the villa seems to shimmer, half real, half illusion. The laughter echoes faintly, carried by the wind. You walk away quickly, not because you're ashamed, but because you know that what you just witnessed wasn't a party, it was a prophecy. And Rome, whether it knows it or not, is already drunk on her spell. The priest arrives at sunset, his robes spotless, his sandals dusted with righteousness. He walks into the palace like a man about to wrestle a storm, clutching a scroll and muttering prayers under his breath. You can tell he's rehearsed this confrontation 100 times in his head. You can also tell he's never met Messalina. The guards lead him into the dining hall, where everything gleams a little too much. Silver trays, golden goblets, and a silence that feels staged. Messalina sits at the head of the table, wearing a robe the color of spilled wine. She doesn't rise to greet him. She just watches him cross the room like a cat watching a bird that hasn't realized its dinner. "Empress," he begins, voice trembling with purpose, "Rome whispers about your sins." The room holds its breath. Messalina smiles as if flattered. "Whispers," she says. "I was hoping they'd be shouting by now." He falters. This wasn't in the script. He recovers, raising his scroll like a shield. "The gods are watching. You've turned the holy city into a—" He searches for the right word. "Market of flesh." Messalina leans forward, resting her chin on her hand. "Oh, priest," she says softly, "you make it sound like a bad thing." She gestures to a servant for wine, then to the chair beside her. "Sit. You'll preach better on a full stomach." He refuses, of course, which only amuses her more. The wine arrives, ruby dark and dangerously sweet. She lifts the cup and drinks slowly, eyes never leaving his. "Tell me," she asks, "have you ever wanted something the gods said you shouldn't?" The question lands like a dart. He doesn't answer, which is answer enough. She gestures again. The servants bring food: figs, roasted quail, pomegranate seeds, glistening like jewels. The smell fills the room. The priest's stomach betrays him with a low growl. Messalina laughs. Even virtue gets hungry. She waves for music. A flute begins to play, soft and haunting. "You think I'm wicked," she says. "Maybe I am, but at least I'm honest about it. How many of your holy brothers preach purity by day and sneak through the city at night?" The priest's face hardens, but his ears turn pink. "You mock the sacred," he says. "You corrupt the people." "I entertain them," she corrects. "You want them to fear heaven. I teach them to love the world. Which of us is kinder?" He opens his mouth, then closes it again. The argument, like the wine, has gone to his head. She rises, circles him slowly, her perfume curling in the air like temptation itself. "You came here to save me," she murmurs. "But tell me, priest, what happens if I save you instead?" He looks away. She laughs, low and soft, the sound of victory disguised as charm. "You believe the gods gave us these bodies as punishment," she says. "I believe they're gifts. Why worship what you're too afraid to touch?" He tries to speak, but the words melt. Messalina stands so close now that her shadow swallows his. For a heartbeat, the holy man forgets his mission, his gods, even his name. She studies his face, her expression unreadable. Then she steps back and sits again, dismissing him with a flick of her hand. "You may go," she says. "Tell your gods I'm beyond saving." The priest hesitates, torn between outrage and awe. Finally, he bows not in reverence, but in defeat. He leaves the way he came, his scroll hanging limp at his side. When the doors close, Messalina takes another sip of wine and smiles faintly. "He'll be back," she says to no one in particular. You believe her, because in Rome, even holiness isn't immune to curiosity. And tonight, curiosity looks a lot like conversion. It starts as a rumor so absurd you laugh when you first hear it. Messalina has remarried while still being married to the emperor. You assume it's a joke, a misunderstanding, maybe a drunken metaphor. Rome is full of both. But by mid-morning, the whispers have turned to shouting, and by noon, every bathhouse, bakery, and brothel in the city is humming with the same impossible story. The Empress has taken another husband, and she didn't bother to do it quietly. You're at the Forum when you see the first signs. A procession winds its way down the street, not imperial but indecently festive. Musicians play as if for Bacchus himself, and petals rain from balconies. At the center of it all, Messalina rides in a chariot beside a man you don't recognize, a handsome patrician with the confident stupidity of someone who thinks love protects him from politics. His name, you soon learn, is Gaius Silius, a senator, widely admired, newly doomed. Messalina is radiant, her hair woven with gold threads that catch the sunlight like a net. She waves to the crowd as if she's leading a victory parade instead of her own scandal. People cheer, not because they approve, but because that's safer than staying silent. Rome has learned that when the Empress plays mad, it's better to pretend it's theater. You follow the procession, half in disbelief, half hypnotized. The pair dismounts at a villa decorated with garlands and torches. There's music, wine, even priests waiting to perform the ceremony. One of them looks pale enough to faint. You can almost hear his internal monologue. It's treason, but it's also Tuesday. He blesses them anyway. The crowd outside swells as word spreads. Senators whisper behind their hands, calculating how long it will take for the emperor to hear. Claudius, meanwhile, is still away in Ostia, inspecting grain supplies, blissfully unaware that his wife just made history in the most catastrophic way possible. The palace messengers exchange nervous looks. Who's going to tell him? No one. Volunteers. Inside, the celebration grows louder. You slip through the open doors and find yourself in the middle of chaos, disguised as matrimony. Tables groan under platters of oysters. Musicians stumble through songs about fidelity. No one finds ironic anymore, and Messalina sits beside her new husband, glowing with the calm certainty of someone convinced she can't lose. She calls him her true match, laughs when someone toasts long life, and kisses him in front of half the Senate. You've never seen arrogance so graceful. Someone whispers that the gods will strike her down. Another mutters that even they wouldn't dare. As the night stretches on, the party begins to tilt into madness. The wine flows faster than sense. Guests start to leave in nervous clusters, pretending they have early appointments. You linger, waiting for the moment she'll falter, for a flicker of fear or doubt. It never comes. She dances barefoot through the hall, trailing silk and danger, her laughter ringing like prophecy. Outside, thunder rolls somewhere over the Tiber. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's Jupiter clearing his throat. Either way, the sky feels heavier. By dawn, the servants are sweeping up petals, and the musicians have fallen asleep where they played. Messalina sits at the head of the table, chin propped on her hand, watching Silius snore beside her. For a moment, she almost looks lonely. Then she smiles, as if she's remembered something amusing about destruction. A few days later, word arrives that Claudius knows. The city holds its breath. You imagine him in his study, ink on his fingers, trying to decide whether this counts as betrayal or just another Roman misunderstanding. When the order finally comes, swift, cold, inevitable, you can't tell whether it's justice or simply bureaucracy catching up. But that morning, as soldiers march toward the villa, you pass the gates and catch a glimpse of Messalina through the window. She's still dressed for celebration, still defiant. She raises a cup of wine and meets your eyes with a smile that says she'd do it all again. And somehow, you believe her. Rumors travel faster than chariots. You hear the first whispers of rebellion, and you start wondering how long desire can outrun consequence. It begins as background noise, the kind Rome is built on. Gossip drifting through bathhouses, half-truths passed over wine, servants pretending not to overhear what they absolutely overhear. But something about these whispers feels different. They're heavier, quieter, the kind people share with their heads bowed, as if afraid the air itself might tattle. You're walking through the forum when the sound of it reaches you, two merchants arguing softly near a stall of dying figs. "He knows," one says. The other laughs nervously. "If he knew, we'd all be dead by now." You pause, pretending to examine the fruit. It's the same argument everyone is having. Has Claudius discovered what his wife has done? And if he has, what happens when a man who's been humiliated by love finally looks up from his scrolls? By afternoon, the rumors take shape. A messenger from Ostia has returned, pale and sweating, claiming the emperor went silent after hearing the news. Some say he wept, others say he didn't understand. One version has him collapsing into his secretary's arms, another has him calmly ordering lunch. Rome loves a story, especially when it can't decide which one is true. You pass a group of senators gathered under the portico, their conversation sharper than their smiles. They're debating how guilty they'll look when the tide turns. One insists that loyalty to the Empress is loyalty to Rome. Another quietly asks if loyalty is still useful when it gets you killed. The marble floor beneath them gleams with their reflections' many faces. One fear. In the palace, the atmosphere has curdled. Servants move like shadows, carrying trays no one eats from. Messalina still smiles, still hosts dinners, though the laughter sounds thinner now, strained at the edges. Her new husband, Silius, paces like a man waiting for a storm he pretended wasn't real. You see him whisper to her once something about leaving the city. She just laughs and says, "You can't outrun Rome." Meanwhile, in Ostia, Claudius is said to be consulting his advisors. The freedman Narcissus, clever and cold, is the first to speak plainly. She married another man, he tells the emperor, in public, before witnesses. Claudius reportedly blinks, confused. "But I'm her husband," he says. Narcissus nods. "Not anymore." Something in the emperor's face changes, then not rage exactly, but recognition, the kind of quiet you hear before glass shatters. By evening, the city feels suspended in a breath. The fountains trickle softly, the streets unusually empty. Even the beggars stay close to the walls, as if the air has grown dangerous. Somewhere, a soldier's trumpet sounds, distant but deliberate. You tell yourself it's nothing. Rome tells itself a lot of things right before they stop being true. When the order finally comes, it moves like fire through dry grass. Claudius is returning. He wants Messalina brought before him. The gossip spreads faster than the messengers can ride. People rush to windows and balconies, craning for a glimpse of retribution. You find yourself among them, caught between curiosity and dread. At the palace gates, the guards shift uneasily. They've sworn oaths to both husband and wife, and now they realize oaths don't count when history starts writing. Messalina appears at the balcony, still beautiful, still composed, though her eyes move too fast. She whispers something to Silius. He looks like a man realizing that all the doors in the world have just closed at once. The night swells with noise, marching boots, clattering armor, the metallic heartbeat of an empire waking up angry. You stand, in the courtyard, feeling the pulse of it under your feet. Rome is alive, restless, waiting. Someone beside you mutters that desire always burns brighter than consequence. You want to believe that. But as the sky darkens over the palace, you know the fire's finally caught something that won't stop burning until it's ash. It starts with laughter that sounds too sharp to be joy. Messalina has grown tired of ordinary pleasures, and that's never good news for anyone within 100 miles of the palace. Tonight, she decides to turn Rome itself into her stage. The invitation says, "An evening of amusements," which is code for chaos with wine service. You arrive late on purpose, hoping to avoid participation. That's adorable of you. The palace courtyard is unrecognizable, draped in crimson silks and lanterns shaped like masks. Musicians play something too cheerful for the tension in the air. Messalina sits in the center on a raised dais, not so much ruling as conducting the evening like an orchestra of discomfort. Her smile is wide, theatrical, and absolutely without mercy. Around her, senators and noblewomen perch on the edge of their seats, trying to decide if laughter or silence will keep them alive longer. It begins with a mock trial. 2 courtiers are dragged forward, accused of crimes of boredom. The audience laughs dutifully. Messalina leans back, eyes gleaming. "You," she says to one trembling man, "have been found guilty of wearing unflattering sandals in the presence of the Empress." Gasps, nervous laughter, applause. Your punishment, 5 lashes from Cupid himself. A boy dressed as the god of love appears, carrying a pink whip. The crowd claps like this is a festival instead of a breakdown. The man pretends to find it funny. Everyone pretends. You watch as her games grow stranger. A noblewoman is made to stand and recite poetry, praising the Empress's beauty, stumbling through every line, while Messalina corrects her. Meter. A soldier must act out his own cowardice in pantomime. The crowd roars. Messalina beams. She doesn't need power tonight. She needs performance. Then come the weddings. "We've too much solemnity in Rome," she announces. "Let's see how love looks when it's honest." Servants rush forward with veils and garlands. 2 strangers are paired off, one confused senator and a slave who looks like she'd rather be anywhere else. The priest is a jester wearing laurels. The vows are improvised, ridiculous, possibly illegal. Messalina officiates, toasting the couple with wine that spills down her arm. "You may kiss your mistake," she declares, and the crowd howls. She stages another, then another. Each pair more absurd than the last, old with young, rich with poor, enemies with lovers. It's hilarious until it isn't. You notice the smiles are stiffening, laughter thinning, even the musicians slow, uncertain if they're playing for pleasure or survival. Messalina doesn't notice or doesn't care. Her eyes shine with a feverish delight. You realize she isn't mocking them. She's testing them, seeing who dares to look away. When one man refuses to kneel for his forced ceremony, the courtyard freezes. Messalina studies him, her smile still painted on but her voice softening to something dangerous. "Defiance," she says. "How refreshing." She circles him like a lioness, close enough that her perfume replaces the air. "You think me cruel?" she whispers. "No, I'm kind. I give Rome what it wants, spectacle." Then, louder, "Let him live. He's useful proof that bravery exists only in fools." The crowd exhales as if spared. Hours pass. The torches burn low. The guests slump with exhaustion, but Messalina is still radiant, still restless. She orders one final performance, a play of her own design. It's about an empress betrayed by her husband and redeemed by her beauty. She plays the lead, of course. The courtiers play the chorus, singing her praises in off-key terror. You don't remember how it ends, only her laughter echoing through the marble halls, long after the music dies. When the guests finally stumble into the night, the air feels lighter, like something monstrous has just fed. You glance back once and see her alone on the dais, her smile fading as the masks are taken down. For a moment she looks almost human, tired, empty, waiting for applause that will never feel loud enough. Then she lifts her goblet again, tilts her head, and begins to plan the next act. It begins with envy disguised as admiration. The women of Rome have grown tired of being overshadowed by Messalina, the empress who treats scandal like a sport and consequence like applause. At first, they whisper about her, the way one might gossip about a thunderstorm, fascinated, fearful, pretending not to look while absolutely looking. But somewhere between rumor and revelation, admiration turns into imitation. You notice it first in the hair. The neat, pearl-pinned buns of the matrons vanish overnight, replaced by towering curls lacquered in oils and gold dust, swaying dangerously as their wearers glide through the streets. Perfumes become louder too, heavy clouds of myrrh and musk that make every alley smell like temptation wearing jewelry. Even the courtesans, who once prided themselves on subtlety, now parade in gowns cut to scandalize the gods themselves. Rome doesn't walk anymore. It shimmers, struts, seduces. The men pretend to disapprove. They shake their heads in public baths and mutter about moral decay. But their eyes betray them, darting like moths toward every flash of bare shoulder. One senator, particularly pious on record, trips while staring at a dancer's anklet and sprains his dignity. Another writes an entire speech condemning immorality, then delivers it while visibly wearing eyeliner. Rome laughs, because Rome always laughs, especially when it's guilty. Even the temples aren't spared. Priestesses start wearing their veils thinner, their prayers softer, as if appealing directly to Venus instead of the heavens. Offerings double, not because of faith, but because beauty has become the new religion. The gods, if they're watching, must be torn between outrage and amusement. Messalina doesn't discourage any of it. Why would she? The more they imitate her, the more powerful she becomes. Every imitation is a confession of defeat. She walks through the forum one morning, draped in gauze the color of dawn, and the city practically bows without realizing it. Women adjust their stoles, men stumble through greetings, and a child drops his basket of figs just staring. She doesn't smile. She doesn't have to. Soon, Rome feels less like a capital and more like a fever dream. Dinner parties dissolve into competitions of excess, who can serve rarer fish, colder wine, more exotic lovers. One hostess fills her fountains with rose water and hires actors to play satyrs who pour drinks. Another throws a banquet where guests dine lying naked on silver sheets. You attend one out of morbid curiosity and leave feeling like your eyes need confession. The courtesans themselves, those unofficial ambassadors of pleasure, decide they've had enough of being outperformed. They unite, not with pitchforks but with powder and pearls, declaring that if Messalina can rewrite the rules, they'll write the sequel. They throw their own feasts, louder, bolder, cheaper, but somehow more human. Poets flock to them. Senators sneak in under cloaks. Someone coins the term, the courtesan's revolt, though it's less rebellion than revelry. The city thrives on it, drunk on its own reflection. By midsummer, decorum is a myth. The forums smell of incense and ambition. The theaters overflow with plays too obscene to pretend otherwise, and even the statues seem to smirk. You overhear a philosopher claim that virtue has gone into exile. His companion replies that virtue was never invited to begin with. Through it all, Messalina watches like a playwright whose production has taken on a life of its own. For once, she doesn't need to perform. The city is performing her. Her gestures, her laughter, her hunger multiplied 1,000 times across every marble street. It's both victory and curse, and you can't tell which she enjoys more. One night, from your window, you see torches flickering along the Palatine Hill, casting wild shadows over domes and rooftops. Music drifts faintly through the heat, blending with the murmur of a city that's forgotten how to sleep. You realize Rome has become something unrecognizable, beautiful, delirious, doomed, like a god drunk on its own divinity. Somewhere in the distance, the Empress's laughter rises above it all, bright and endless. It doesn't sound like joy. It sounds like ownership. You're sitting at a tavern that smells like philosophy, wine, and something on fire. Outside, the city hums with its usual fever. But here, in the dim corner near the cracked mural of Bacchus, two men argue as if the fate of Rome depends on who can sound more tragic. One wears the robe of a philosopher, carefully stained with the right amount of neglect. The other, dressed like someone who owes every god a favor, drinks like he's trying to forget which ones. They're talking about her, of course they are. Everyone is. Messalina has become the gravitational center of every conversation, drawing gossip and theory toward her like planets with better jewelry. The philosopher gestures with his cup, spilling wine with the passion of a man confident in his own misery. "She is proof," he says, "that the gods have cursed us. No mortal woman could invent such chaos unaided." The fool grins, showing teeth like missing marble tiles. "No, my friend. She's just bored. You give divine credit to what can be explained by too much money and not enough. Shame." The philosopher frowns. "Boredom cannot explain blasphemy. Neither can philosophy," the fool replies, refilling his cup. "You should leave." But something about their debate is hypnotic, the way high-minded despair collides with cheap laughter. The tavern crowd leans in, pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Someone snaps a breadstick in half, like punctuation. The philosopher sighs, the kind of sigh that belongs on marble statues. "She mocks virtue itself," he says. "When a woman turns her body into a throne, the world collapses into appetite." The fool nods, unfazed. "Yes, but the world was hungry long before she fed it. You can't blame a feast for existing when everyone's already starving." He takes another sip and adds, "Besides, at least she's honest about what Rome worships. You lot call it philosophy. She calls it pleasure." The philosopher narrows his eyes. "You admire her?" "I admire the efficiency," says the fool. "It takes senators' entire speeches to disguise their lust. She does it in one glance." Their laughter is uneven, one sharp, one bitter. You notice the other patrons exchanging smirks, enjoying the spectacle. It's easier to debate corruption than admit participation. The philosopher leans closer, lowering his voice. "Do you not fear what she represents? A woman who confuses love with power and power with hunger? Rome cannot survive her." The fool swirls his wine, staring into it like it might argue back. "Rome can survive anything," he says. "We've survived mad emperors, plagues, and poets. What's one woman with better taste? She will bring ruin. She'll bring entertainment." The fool counters, then raises his cup toward the ceiling. "And honestly, after all those tax reforms, we could use it." The philosopher doesn't laugh. "You mock morality." "I mock your illusion of it," says the fool, now almost tender. "Morality is a toga you wear until it gets dirty. Then you call it fashion and keep walking." Their argument unravels into something quieter, a strange truce between cynicism and fear. The philosopher studies his cup as though it might refill itself out of pity. "If she were a man," he says softly, "they'd call her ambitious." The fool smiles at that. "Exactly. She's not sinning differently. She's just sinning publicly." Outside, a trumpet sounds. Maybe a wedding, maybe an execution. In Rome, it's often the same thing. They fall silent. The tavern hums again, the kind of hum that lives between scandal and exhaustion. You realize they're not really arguing about Messalina anymore. They're arguing about Rome itself, what it's become, what it's always been, and how much easier it is to blame one woman than admit the whole empire is drunk on its own reflection. The philosopher finally raises his cup. "To divine punishment," he says. The fool clinks his against it. "To better lighting." You leave before they start again, stepping into a street that smells of smoke and violets, wondering which one of them is right or if it even matters in a city that's too busy burning to notice the match. The palace glows like a lantern caught between dream and disaster. Every arch is strung with gold ribbons. Every brazier hums with perfume thick enough to drown in. It's Messalina's newest invention, a masquerade where everyone can be someone else for a night, which sounds harmless until you remember who's hosting. You arrive late, masked, and already regretting the decision. Rome's elite move through the hall like predators disguised as guests, their laughter honeyed, their eyes sharp. You tell yourself it's just another party. You know it's a lie. The masks are magnificent. Lions, doves, gods, monsters, some carved from ivory, others painted so vividly they seem alive. Even the servants wear them. The air buzzes with the strange, giddy power of anonymity. A senator dressed as Apollo flirts with someone who might be his own wife. A courtesan in the mask of a wolf steals kisses and jewelry in equal measure. Every laugh hides a confession, every toast a secret. Somewhere in the corner, musicians play a song too slow for dancing but perfect for undoing restraint. You wander through the marble maze, wine in hand, trying not to make eye contact with anyone whose mask costs more than your rent. The whispers are intoxicating snatches of gossip, moans of laughter, the occasional hiss of intrigue. You catch fragments, a plot, a threat, a scandal so grand it could only belong to this city. Then you hear her, Messalina. The sound of her voice slides through the crowd like a silver blade. She wears a mask shaped like a serpent, jeweled eyes catching the torchlight. Around her, people orbit carefully, afraid to touch the sun. Her gown is the color of temptation, neither red nor gold, but something in between. She moves through the room like she owns it, which, of course, she does. You avoid her instinctively, turning toward the quieter edge of the hall, where shadows make promises they rarely keep. That's where you meet the stranger. A figure in a mask shaped like an owl, voice low and conspiratorial. Beautiful, isn't it? They say, gesturing toward the chaos. Rome pretending not to know itself. You laugh, surprised by your own boldness, and say, pretending is our favorite pastime. The stranger tilts their head. You don't sound convinced. You shrug, drink again, and something in you loosens. Conversation turns slippery, confessional. You talk about Rome, corruption, desire, fear. You talk about the Empress too, because everyone does eventually. She's dangerous, you say, but maybe she's the only one honest enough to be. The stranger listens, silent and intent. The mask gives nothing away. And what about you? They ask. Are you honest? The question hangs between you. You laugh, softer now, because honesty is a luxury Rome can't afford. Sometimes, you say, usually after too much wine. They laugh too, a warm, rich sound that pulls you closer. You lean in, forgetting why you came, forgetting everything except the strange safety of being unseen. Then the music changes, the torches flare. Messalina rises. Unmask, she commands, voice smooth but absolute. A ripple passes through the crowd, delight and dread intertwined. One by one, the masks come off. Apollo is just a sweaty senator, the wolf, a trembling girl, the gods all reduced to mortals again. The room feels suddenly smaller, hotter, real. You turn to your companion. The owl mask comes off. And there she is, the Empress herself. For a moment, you can't breathe. She smiles not cruelly, but knowingly, like someone who's just found the last page of your diary. You speak well, she says, almost bravely. Your mouth opens, closes. Words fail you. She steps closer, close enough that her perfume replaces the air. Don't worry, she whispers. Your honesty is safe with me. The crowd erupts into laughter as the music resumes, but you can't hear it. She's already walking away, her mask dangling from her hand, her laughter a thread of silk trailing through the room. Around you, everyone laughs, drinks, dances, but you can't shake the feeling that somewhere in this hall, you left a part of yourself unmasked, and she's already claimed it. The sculptors arrive before dawn, their carts creaking under blocks of white marble that look like frozen clouds. You think it's for a temple, maybe a new fountain. Then you see the sketches' faces, torsos, smiles too familiar to be mythological. Messalina stands among them in her robe of gold-threaded linen, surveying her newest project, with the calm of a goddess who has decided eternity should be beautiful and personal. She calls it her garden of statues. Rome honors its heroes in marble, she says, her voice syruped with amusement. Why shouldn't I? The men around her laugh the way people laugh when they don't know if they're supposed to. You join in, late and uneven. The Empress turns, eyes bright as polished coins. "Don't you think immortality suits love?" she asks. You manage a nod, though you suspect love is not what she's immortalizing. The sculptors work fast. Chisels bite into stone, turning whispers into anatomy. You wander between half-finished bodies, arms flexing from the marble, faces half-born, lips frozen mid-smirk. The resemblance is uncanny, too uncanny. You recognize senators, poets, soldiers, some dead, some alive, some rumored to have died conveniently. The garden hums with silent laughter, as though the stone remembers things the living would rather forget. Then you see it, your own likeness, emerging pale and unfinished under a sculptor's hand. The curve of the mouth, the angle of the jaw, it's unmistakable. The sight freezes you more thoroughly than the marble itself. The sculptor glances up, startled, his chisel mid-air. "The Empress requested it," he says quickly, as though explanation could soften the omen. "She said you had interesting eyes." You don't feel honored. Statues, in Rome, rarely end well for their subjects. To be immortalized by Messalina is to be claimed, displayed, and perhaps discarded. You wonder if the marble is a monument or a warning. Messalina drifts over, graceful as spilled honey. She studies the likeness, tilts her head. "It's nearly perfect," she murmurs, though the eyes could use more mischief. Her fingers brush the statue's cheek, then yours. "Don't look so frightened. You should be flattered. Most lovers fade. You'll be permanent." The sculptors pretend not to hear. One coughs, another chips too loudly at a block of stone, sending echoes rattling down the colonnade. Messalina moves on, inspecting her, a collection, her empire of frozen desire. She stops before a general statue, its mouth caught in an almost smile. "He boasted he'd conquer the world for me," she says softly. "Now he conquers pigeons." The laughter that follows is bright, cruel, and contagious. Days pass, and the garden fills. Statues stand shoulder to shoulder under cypress trees, a congregation of silence. At night, the moonlight turns them ghostly, and you swear their expressions change when you aren't looking, some mournful, some mocking. Servants whisper that the marble bleeds in the rain. You pretend not to listen. One evening, as the last rays of sun slant across the courtyard, Messalina hosts a dinner among her statues. The guests recline between their stone predecessors, uneasy but obedient. She raises a goblet. To memory, she toasts, the only thing worth owning. The wine glows red in the twilight, and you suddenly notice how the marble catches the same color like veins beneath skin. Afterward, as the guests scatter, she finds you standing before your statue. "Do you hate it?" she asks. You tell her you don't know yet. She smiles faintly. "That's fair. The living rarely understand their monuments." She traces a line down the statue's throat, then looks at you. "Besides, if you disappoint me, marble breaks easily." You leave the garden long after midnight. The air smells of dust and roses. Behind you, the statues gleam in the moonlight, hundreds of faces caught between devotion and doom. Yours among them. You wonder which will crumble first, the marble or your luck. Rome wakes to a new religion, though no one remembers voting for it. Messalina has stopped pretending to be mortal. She emerges from her chambers one morning dressed in white silk that clings like light itself, her hair wound with gold and tiny seashells, her lips painted the color of fresh blood. "Venus reborn," she declares, and no one laughs. At least, not where she can hear. The first time you see her like this, she's standing at the top of the temple steps, arms lifted to the sunrise, as if feeding it her vanity. Behind her, the statue of Venus watches in silence, stone eyes forever rolling. The crowd gathers, unsure whether to worship or applaud. She looks down at them the way gods look at ants, with interest, but no obligation. "Love," she says, "is power dressed in perfume." And just like that, half the city forgets their real goddess ever existed. Within days, the temples are full again, not with prayers, but with performances. The old priestesses, bewildered and jealous, find their altars overrun by dancers draped in roses. Incense burns thick enough to choke. Offerings multiply, but so do rumors. They say Messalina accepts only one kind of sacrifice now, devotion disguised as desire. You go once, out of curiosity. You tell yourself it's research. But curiosity in Rome is never pure. The temple is a theater now. The marble floors shine like mirrors, and the columns are wrapped in silk so fine it ripples when someone breathes. Courtiers kneel in rows, not to Venus, but to the Empress sitting on the goddess's throne, her expression serene and slightly bored, as if holiness were a costume she's already outgrown. She blesses her followers with touches that linger too long to be sacred. The priests don't stop her. They've learned it's easier to rename blasphemy than resist it. You watch as women come forward with offerings, pearls, poetry, even their husbands. One kneels, trembling, holding a mirror to Messalina's face. "To reflect the divine," she whispers. Messalina smiles and tilts the mirror just enough to catch her own eyes. "Perfect," she says. "I see eternity." The crowd gasps. You wonder if they're horrified or converted, maybe both. Outside, Rome adjusts to her divinity. Goldsmiths craft amulets shaped like her profile. Bakers sell bread stamped with her likeness. Even the poets, ever opportunistic, rename their muses after her. The city begins to speak her language. Every promise sounds like seduction, every blessing like a challenge. A senator is found painting her initials onto his wife's shoulder with crushed pearls. When asked why, he says simply, "It's safer." But divinity demands distance, and soon even her closest allies begin to vanish from her side. Those who adored her are replaced by those who fear her. Messalina notices, of course, but she mistakes solitude for majesty. She holds audiences at twilight, seated on her throne of marble and mirrors, her eyes glazed with something too bright to be sanity. "The gods envy me," she says once, not as a boast but as prophecy. You see her again weeks later, alone in her temple, surrounded by flowers that are already wilting. The air smells sweet and faintly rotten. She traces her reflection in the polished floor and asks you, almost gently, "Do you think I've gone too far?" You start to answer, but she laughs before you can. "Impossible," she says. "Venus cannot sin." You leave her there, half woman, half statue, glowing in the candlelight like a myth still deciding whether it wants to die or be believed. Outside, the night air feels heavier, full of prayers no one really means, and silence that sounds a lot like awe. Somewhere behind you, the goddess laughs again, soft, divine, and utterly human. He arrives as a spy and leaves as a story people whisper over wine. You see him first in the palace courtyard, tall, polished, and entirely too confident for someone about to step into a lion's mouth. His orders are simple: observe the Empress, record her sins, and deliver the truth to the Emperor. But truth in Rome is a flexible thing, and Messalina has a way of turning loyalty into perfume and making even honesty smell like flattery. He blends in well enough at first, keeping to the edges of her parties, listening more than speaking. You catch him watching her the way soldiers watch storms, half in awe, half calculating whether the walls will hold. He takes notes on parchment hidden inside his tunic, though you suspect half of it is less intelligence and more confession. Every night he swears he'll stay detached. Every morning he wakes further gone. When she finally speaks to him, it's not a command but a question. "Are you here to worship or to spy?" she asks, smiling like she already knows. He answers, "Can it be both?" She laughs, and it sounds like approval. From then on, he stops pretending he's invisible. He becomes her shadow. He follows her to the baths, the gardens, the private dinners that never end with dinner. He's supposed to be gathering evidence, names, lovers, plots, but the only thing he's documenting now is her. Her laugh, her perfume, the way she toys with power like it's a strand of hair between her fingers. You see him change, less soldier, more supplicant. He doesn't even notice the transformation, which is the first sign he's doomed. Messalina notices, of course. She notices everything. She keeps him close, dangling affection like a medal, rewarding obedience with attention. Some nights she speaks softly to him, voice thick as honey, asking about his childhood, his loyalties, his dreams. Other nights she ignores him completely, letting silence do the seducing. Either way, she wins. The reports he sends back to Claudius grow shorter, stranger. The first says, "The Empress is guilty of indulgence beyond measure." The second, "She is unlike any woman I have ever known." The third, "Forgive me, but I understand her now." The fourth never arrives. When you see him again, it's during one of her midnight feasts. He's no longer standing guard at the walls. He's reclining beside her, a wreath of laurel on his head and wine on his breath. The other guests look away politely, the way Romans do when watching a man's self-control being skinned alive. Messalina whispers something in his ear that makes him blush. It's a miracle anyone can blush in this palace, but he manages. Later that night, you find him alone in the corridor, staring at one of the marble statues she had commissioned. "She'll destroy me," he says quietly, almost admiringly. "Then she'll mourn me for an hour." You tell him to leave while he still can. He shakes his head. "You don't walk away from divinity," he says. "You crawl." By the end of the week, he's gone. Officially, he's been reassigned. Unofficially, no one knows. The guards mutter that he was sent to deliver a message to the coast. The servants swear they saw his cloak at dawn, tangled in the Empress's garden. Messalina says nothing, which tells you everything. When you pass the garden days later, you notice a new statue being carved. The sculptor works slowly. His chisel, tracing familiar, features a strong jaw, kind eyes, a mouth caught between awe and warning. You don't ask who it is, you already know. The marble gleams in the sunlight, pale and perfect. Somewhere inside the palace, Messalina laughs, the sound low and endless, like the sea claiming another shore. Claudius finally hears. The news reaches him not through courtiers or senators, but through a nervous freedman who stammers so hard he nearly swallows the message. The emperor looks up from his papers, quill still dripping with ink. He has been reviewing aqueduct reports all morning, approving road repairs, and debating quietly, internally, whether olives count as a vegetable or a fruit. The word bigamy does not fit naturally into his day. At first, he thinks it's a mistake. His wife, his Messalina, married another man, in public, with musicians. He blinks, as if the absurdity might dissolve under scrutiny. "Married?" he repeats, slow and careful. The messenger nods. "Miserable." "To a senator, my lord." Claudius stares down at his parchment. "Alive?" "Very. Very." Something in his face changes, but not enough for anyone to call it anger. He looks tired, like a man whose peace and paperwork have been abruptly misplaced. Narcissus, his most cunning advisor, steps forward. "Sire," he says gently, "this cannot go unanswered. The empire mocks you." Claudius sets down his pen. "They always mock me." "Yes," Narcissus says, "but now they're correct." That lands. The emperor stands. The room goes still. The other courtiers, ever alert to shifting weather, start bowing like reeds in a storm. Claudius doesn't shout. He never shouts. He simply says, "Bring her to me." You're in the city when the order reaches the palace guard. It travels faster than rumor, and that's saying something. By dusk, soldiers are marching through the marble gates, armor clinking, faces pale. Rome smells different tonight, like metal, rain, and the sharp edge of something ending. Servants scatter. Courtiers lock their doors. Even the fountains sound nervous. Messalina is found in the gardens, surrounded by the wreckage of her own myth. The marble statues of her lovers stand pale in the moonlight, each one suddenly funereal. She's barefoot, draped in silk, the picture of serenity if serenity had fangs. "My husband wants to see me," she says. The captain nods, trying not to look directly at her. "Then we should hurry," she murmurs. He doesn't like to wait, but they never reach him. Narcissus intercepts the escort halfway to Ostia. His face is expressionless, his voice softer than pity. "The Emperor changes his mind," he says. "He wants this finished quickly." Messalina studies him, perhaps remembering every time he bowed too deeply or spoke too sweetly. "Ah," she says quietly. He finally reads his own orders. They give her a dagger. She stares at it for a long time, weighing it in her hand as if testing its truth. The guards look away. The night hums with the sound of cicadas and inevitability. When she hesitates, Narcissus sighs and gestures. A soldier steps forward. The sound is quick, almost kind. By morning, the news spreads across the city like perfume overwrought. The Empress is dead. The Emperor signs the warrant hours later, still not realizing he's only ratifying what's already been done. His signature is steady. He doesn't ask where she is buried. He just asks for more paper. In the forum, the statues stand unguarded, streaked with dew. No one dares remove them. The sculptors whisper that her likeness still feels warm to the touch. Rome, ever practical, moves on. The bakeries reopen. The senators rehearse their eulogies, and you, walking through the quiet streets, can almost hear her laughter still echoing off the stones, bright, dangerous, and impossibly alive. You flee through Rome's underbelly with the Empress's servants, watching her empire of excess crumble like a drunk collapsing into a fountain. The night smells of smoke and vinegar, the twin perfumes of panic and ruin. You clutch a bundle of coins you probably won't live long enough to spend. Around you, the servants whisper prayers to gods who've stopped answering calls from this address. The alleys are alive. Every shadow holds a rumor, every torch another betrayal. You pass the bathhouses, first doors bolted, fountains dry. The same marble halls that once echoed with laughter and perfume now reek of mildew and abandonment. A few brave courtesans linger outside, faces pale under streaks of rouge, waiting for customers who will never return. One of them spits in the dirt and mutters, "Her name cursed us all." You don't argue. You move faster, following the others down into the market district, now a graveyard of overturned stalls. Wine seeps into the cobblestones where amphorae have shattered, turning the street into a river of sour red. A pig wanders past with a senator's bracelet tangled around its neck. Somewhere above, you hear shouting, Claudius's soldiers maybe, or looters who've learned too quickly how to fill a power vacuum. Every few steps, someone glances back toward the palace, though the skyline already tells the story. The torchlight of the imperial compound flickers in the distance, frantic and uneven. You imagine Narcissus standing over the wreckage, making lists, issuing orders, pretending this is just another household audit. The thought would be funny if it weren't tragic. At the edge of the Subura, you pause to rest. The city's filth clings to you, sweat, smoke, fear. Around you, the servants whisper about what comes next. One swears the Empress is still alive, hidden in a friend's villa. Another says she's fled the city dressed as a slave. A third insists she's become a ghost already, laughing from the Tiber. Everyone talks because silence would mean believing the truth, that the woman who turned Rome into her stage has finally fallen through the trapdoor. You catch your reflection in a puddle and almost don't recognize it. The city's glow has vanished, replaced by a darkness that feels heavier than night. You wonder how many of you are left, those who lived too close to her fire, who mistook her warmth for light. When you reach the river, the wind shifts. The Tiber moves sluggishly, thick as oil. Across the water, the Temple of Venus stands silent, its steps littered with wilted offerings. A stray cat perches on the altar, licking spilled wine like it's communion. Someone kneels to pray, whispering Messalina's name as though she's still divine. You want to tell them the gods don't stay dead in Rome, they just change masks, but you stay quiet. A distant trumpet sounds from the forum. Orders barked, armor clattering, the rhythm of empire reasserting itself. Claudius has remembered he's emperor. The city that once adored her is already scrubbing her name from its walls. You picture masons chiseling at marble, erasing her face from history one, careful strike at a time. The irony isn't lost on you. Rome only builds in stone so it can destroy more dramatically. One of the servants turns to you, eyes wide. What happens to us now? You almost laugh. The question feels too big for this hour, this street, this version of the world. We find another master, you say, because it's the only answer anyone in Rome ever has. Dawn creeps in reluctantly. The sky is pale and bruised, the kind of light that exposes everything and forgives nothing. You look back one last time toward the Palatine Hill. The smoke has thinned, but the silence is worse. Somewhere beneath that quiet, marble cracks, statues fall. The empire adjusts its crown. You keep walking. Rome doesn't stop for ghosts, and Messalina has become the loudest one yet. The roses are too red. They've always been that way in this garden, bred to impress, not to smell, and now they watch like witnesses, petals glistening under the last light of a Roman dusk. The guards move quietly, their armor whispering against itself, afraid to make more noise than the moment demands. You follow them through the gate, past the fountain that still runs pink from spilled wine, toward the woman who once made this place her stage. Messalina stands at the center of the garden she built for pleasure, surrounded by the ghosts of her own indulgence. The silk of her gown is torn but arranged carefully, as if vanity refuses to die before she does. Her hair is undone, her lips still painted, the color defiant against the fading day. She's cornered, but she looks like a hostess greeting late guests, not a condemned woman awaiting her end. The captain hesitates. Everyone does. To kill an empress is one thing. To kill her feels like stepping into a myth mid-performance. She smiles at their discomfort, that same amused, impossible smile that once made senators kneel and poets forget their lines. "Come now," she says softly. Rome waits for an ending. Let's not keep it bored. You can tell she's been rehearsing. Every tilt of her head, every flicker of humor, it's all choreography. Even here, in the dirt, she's directing the scene. One of the guards mumbles a prayer. Another crosses himself like the old gods might forgive him for this. The captain draws his sword, the sound slicing through the air. Too clean, too modern for a tragedy like this. Messalina looks past him. To you. Her eyes hold something unreadable mockery, maybe mercy. "Do you think they'll remember me?" she asks. You don't know what to say. "They'll rewrite you," you answer finally. She laughs, a short, bright sound that makes even the roses shiver. "Of course they will," she says. "That's how Rome loves best, by lying beautifully." The captain steps forward. She doesn't flinch. If anything, she straightens, chin lifting toward the twilight as if she's watching the sun lower itself in respect. "Wait," she says. "Not yet." She plucks a rose from the nearest bush, its thorns tearing a line of red across her palm. She studies it, the wound, the bloom, and smiles. "There," she murmurs. "Now I match the garden." When the sword falls, it's almost gentle. The sound it makes is smaller than you expect, like a curtain being drawn. The world doesn't end. The fountains keep running. The wind keeps whispering through the cypress trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. The soldiers avert their eyes, but you can't. You watch as she collapses among her own roses, the silk pooling like spilled sunset around her. For a moment, the garden looks exactly as she designed it, perfumed, exquisite, obscene. Narcissus will call it justice. Claudius will call it necessary. The poets will call it something else entirely. Rome will shrug, hungry for its next spectacle. And the roses, indifferent and blooming, will drink deep from the soil she left behind. When you finally turn to leave, the air feels heavier, thick with scent and silence. Behind you, the Empress lies as she lived, impossibly vivid, impossible to ignore. Her laughter lingers in the wind, bright and eternal, echoing through the marble city that once belonged to her. Even her death, you realize, was just another performance. And like all her performances, it brings the house down. Rome wakes up, pretending nothing happened. The air smells of smoke, bread, and hypocrisy, three things the city produces in equal measure. The streets are full again, senators in spotless togas stepping carefully around yesterday's ashes as if the dirt might stain their memory. You walk through it all, watching the empire scrub itself clean, one denial at a time. The marble steps of the Forum are crowded with men shouting about justice, though none of them mention her name. They say the Empress, the fallen one, the unfortunate woman, as if language itself has grown modest. A few bolder gossips whisper Messalina, but only behind fans, like she might rise from the dust and ask for a dance. Her statues come down before noon. Hammers echo through the city, the sound crisp and oddly cheerful. Pieces of her face roll into gutters, where children kick them like pebbles. Still, she lingers. The perfume that once drifted through the palace now haunts every corner of the city. It clings to the silk merchants' stalls, to the courtyards where she laughed too loudly, to the senators' wives who secretly miss being scandalized. Even the baths smell faintly of her oils, as though the marble refuses to forget. Rome can erase her name, but scent has better memory than history. You pass a wall where her portrait used to hang. Now it's just plaster, cracked and pale. Someone has scrawled a crude sketch of a crown above the empty space, then crossed it out. The message underneath reads, "Love is treason." Rome's poetry department has never lacked enthusiasm. At the temples, priests are already rewriting hymns. Venus, they claim, never left her altar, certainly not to mingle in human scandal. The offerings triple overnight, as though the city is trying to bribe the gods into collective amnesia. The high priest of Jupiter gives a sermon about moral decay, though everyone knows he once attended her midnight feasts. It's remarkable how quickly sin can be rebranded as oversight. In the markets, the storytellers get to work. Each retelling makes her larger or smaller, saint or monster, depending on who's buying. Some say she bewitched the emperor. Others claim she plotted to crown her lover. One old woman insists Messalina never existed at all, that she's a metaphor for lust and power. You want to laugh, but the crowd nods solemnly, grateful for an explanation that costs them nothing. By nightfall, the city hums with new gossip to replace the old. A senator's daughter elopes. A general's son is caught bribing augurs. Life resumes its scandalous rhythm, though slower now, as if everyone is watching the shadows for her ghost. You drink wine at a tavern near the river, and even there her name drips through the conversation like spilled honey. A man swears he saw her carriage on the Appian Way, moving without horses. Another claims her laughter came from the gardens after sunset. The barkeep rolls his eyes but pours another round. Rome forgets quickly, but not completely. The city survives by burying its shame under fresher sins. Somewhere behind the palace, masons carve new statues for the next empress, careful to make her expression demure. They chisel out the old inscriptions, but you can still see traces of the letters beneath. You leave the city at dawn, following the road that leads away from her marble ruins. The sun rises over the rooftops, gilding the temples, the fountains, the broken pedestals where her likeness once stood. The pigeons land where she was worshipped, unbothered and victorious. You realize then that Messalina isn't gone at all. She's in every whispered secret, every hungry look, every toast to beauty that outlived its welcome. Rome cleans itself, yes, but the perfume remains. The ruins are quieter than you remember. Time has worn them down to polite whispers, but even silence in Rome feels rehearsed. You stand among the fallen columns, the air heavy with dust and memory, and you realize the city never truly forgets it, just changes the subject. The marble glows faintly in the morning light, too pale to be innocent. Children run where senators once schemed. Lovers carve their initials into the same stones that once bore imperial decrees. The forum is half museum, half marketplace, still arguing with itself about what it's supposed to be. A guide gestures toward a cracked pedestal and says something about an empress best left unnamed. The crowd nods, the way tourists do when pretending to understand history, but when the breeze turns and her name slips through soft, conspiratorial, Messalina, every pigeon takes flight at once. You follow the path past the remnants of her gardens. The roses are gone, replaced by stubborn weeds, but the layout is unmistakable, too symmetrical, too sensual. The fountain at the center still murmurs, though no one feeds it coins anymore. You close your eyes and can almost hear her laughter, distant and shimmering, a sound that once pulled Rome by the throat. A sculptor works nearby, chipping at a block of stone. You pause to watch. The shape emerging isn't hers, but the tilt of the jaw, the suggestion of mischief, feels suspiciously familiar. The artist wipes his brow and says, "She's no one in particular," which, in Rome, means exactly the opposite. You wonder if the marble remembers her touch, if the dust carries echoes of her perfume. Further along, you find a fragment of a statue half buried in the earth, just a hand, fingers poised, as if about to beckon. The gesture is unmistakable, command, disguised as invitation. You brush the dirt away, and for a moment, the sun catches on the smooth curve of the stone, making it look alive. You pull back quickly, half expecting it to move. The locals tell stories still. A baker swears her ghost walks near the Palatine Hill, trailing roses where she goes. A priest insists her laughter disrupts his evening prayers. The taverns whisper that every powerful woman since carries a bit of her spirit, though no one says it too loudly. Rome loves its myths obedient, not resurrected. You stop before a temple wall, its carvings eroded to near oblivion. At its base, faint letters cling to life, too shallow to read but too stubborn to vanish. You trace them with your fingertips, wondering if her name was once there, if the masons truly managed to erase her or only pretended to. The city pretends a lot. The sun climbs higher, turning the ruins gold. Somewhere behind you, a street performer begins to play a reed flute. The tune is light, careless, but it fits. Rome, after all, has always danced on graves. The tourists drift away, chasing their next postcard, and you're left alone with the stones and their secrets. You think about how empires fall, how beauty decays, and how some names refuse to stay buried. You think about her barefoot in marble halls, laughing at the laws meant to contain her. She burned fast, yes, but she left a glow that never quite dimmed. As you walk away, the wind picks up again. It rushes through the ruins, carrying that name once more soft, dangerous, eternal. The stones seem to sigh in recognition. For a moment, you swear the city itself blushes. Messalina.